You know who I just seen a video of recently? I saw this video of Ben Shapiro. Hold up, let me just turn on this game music. Um, I saw this video of Ben Shapiro. I guess he was like reacting to some people's marriage advice.
Oh yeah, him reacting to Fresh and Fit or whatever, I think. Or do you not say their names? Yeah.
And I was watching it, and they were talking about him as well. And then at one point, I think one of them mentioned the fact that, oh, people like Ben, they out of touch because they had an arranged marriage. And I was like, confused. I didn't know this was true, so I went to look up how Ben met his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how he met her? I guess he just saw her somewhere one time and then took an interest, and so he started hanging out with her every day for like 3 months, and then they just got engaged. Now, to everyone else, I think 3 months in sounds very, very fast, but I think from a lot of people from extremely like religious and conservative backgrounds, that timeline is not the craziest one in the world. But I don't know. You know what was kind of refreshing? And like, I think we've been talking a lot about people grifting and whatnot, but irrespective of how I feel about Ben personally, I thought it was kind of refreshing just seeing somebody online who kind of lives out the values that they profess in regards to faith. And I don't know. I think like one of the main things that turned me off of religion when I was a younger kid was mostly seeing how hypocritical a lot of people who loudly profess their faith. And so when I see people who like traditionally live those values, there's something about that I really like admire, even if I don't agree with them politically on a lot of topics. You didn't get that feeling watching at least Ben, or you know who else gave me that feeling? Let me see.
Oh, I was gonna say for Ben, yeah. I talked about this a while ago, but he did a show with Lex Friedman, about talking about his relationship. One of the criticisms I have for people that talk about trad relationships all the time is they are so incredibly fucking disgusting with how they talk about the women. And if you come from a traditional background or a conservative background and you really do traditional relationships, you never talk about the women like that. They're not these inferior dipshit beings that like just sit in the household because all they can do is like make babies and clean, right? Like the woman has like a lot of responsibility in the household, and there's a partnership with the father, and like, yeah, the father might have the final say on things, but he's not like walking around like a fucking tyrant in the household. Like, he's doing everything with the consultation of his wife. Of course, it's a partnership. And Ben actually goes through a lot in his Lex Friedman conversation talking about the relationship with his wife, and he sounds like he has a phenomenal relationship with his wife. He talks about how she helps him like reflect on ideas and shit, and they share a lot of like household stuff and everything, and like, yeah, he's like one of the only, well, I say one of the only conservatives. I don't know how many conservatives talk about their relationships, but his relationship sounds like a very good model for like anybody trying to do like a traditional relationship where the woman is like respected, and it doesn't just sound like somebody that fucking hates women,
I think it would be hard to be in those kinds of relationships and in that kind of faith and talk like that. Because at least talk crazy, because not just from like a religious standpoint, because most of the religious texts that I've seen in regards to spousal relationships talk about being extremely respectful of your wife, but also if you're very serious about religion and you're marrying someone from the same religion, families are very much involved. How would it look publicly if the man who you're marrying your daughter off to is just out here talking about women in the most disgusting manner?
Yeah.
And you're like a real man of faith. Like, there's no way you would ever want your daughter to be in that kind of environment where he's just talking about like all these bitches and whores and stuff like that. Like, if you're a real man of God, you wouldn't want that,
Yeah, I started thinking about this a lot more. I think on and at least I can force them to look stupid, because I asked Sneeko this question once. One question I really want to push a lot of these red pillars on is like, okay, let's pretend, now first, this is a big ask, okay, but pretend you have a woman that's a friend, okay? If a woman came up to you and she was like, hey, I met this guy, he seems like pretty cool, but he says that if we date, he's gonna fuck around with a lot of girls, like, should I date? Like, what would you ever tell a woman in that circumstance? Like, nobody in the history of the planet is like, yeah, you go, girl, like, it's okay if he's like sharing you with other women, or if you're sharing him with other women, like, it'll be a great relationship, he's a high value man. Like, nobody would ever say that, ever, in the history of all of mankind. And the fact that these guys all act like it's just like totally fucking normal and like every woman would go for it, it's like, well, think about if you're, or like I asked Sneeko this, like, would you be okay with your daughter dating Andrew Tate? And he was like, yeah, I think I would. It's like, bullshit, dude. No fucking shot. But yeah.
I mean, he's saying that somebody who doesn't have kids or doesn't have.
Yeah, I know. But like, even so, like, would you really want your daughter or a family member to date like a fucking playboy? Is that real? Like, no shot. Your sister? Anybody? Like,
I'll say I'm a little bit forgiving of that stance, because I think until my niece was around all the time, I didn't realize how much you can care for a little person. You know what I'm saying? Like, I really shared that. I don't give a fuck kids, whatever. And then she started coming around. I'm like, damn, I've never been more protective of another individual in my life. So I think I can understand why they can say that, because they're purely speaking from like like
the male
displaced in their
perspective and
mind
what they want.
without knowing like the emotional and like just intrinsic attachment you build to somebody like that once you see them growing up. That's the only way you could do it. I have not known anybody who's actually had kids who would ever repeat what they've said.
Yeah.
No one. Even
like, oh, my daughter came home today. Like, today she's hanging out with us because her husband is fucking another woman, but we're so proud of her for landing a high value guy. Like, who the fuck would ever? Like, that's such a wild statement. But these people all act like it's super normal. Rollo Tomasi, Just Pearly Things, the freshman makers are like, oh yeah, like women love to share high value men. It's like, what the? Who do you talk to? Has there even been a woman on your show that says that? Like, even when I go on and I ask the women there, like, would you share a guy? I'm pretty sure like almost every single woman says no. I'm like, who the fuck? And that's even those are the fresh and fit girls. This is like your most extreme population. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I will say in their defense, I think a lot of this stuff is a little bit more culturally common than people realize. It's never spoken about openly, nor is it proudly proclaimed. So the way that they're doing it, because you have to imagine, like, even for my mom, like anything that these guys say she would find incredibly disgusting. But when she describes to me what it was like growing up in her time in Ethiopia and stuff like that, culturally speaking, like a lot of this stuff was just very commonplace. Like people going to whorehouses, doing things behind the person's back. And it was very normalized. Doesn't mean it was accepted, but it was just a thing where people understood this thing happens pretty commonly. What you couldn't do and what is extremely bad is out there talking about it loudly and then embarrassing the family or embarrassing your partner's family or the community at large, because then it just looks terrible because everyone has to keep up appearances. Even from a religious standpoint, like plenty of people are sitting behind closed doors and doing really disgusting stuff, and plenty of people in the community know this. What's really a problem is when you speak about it openly, there's a certain amount of embarrassment and shame you're supposed to have when it comes to that behavior.
Yeah, that's I would believe that more, sure.
I mean, I can tell you this. Here's an example. Mm-hmm. In a lot of religious communities, the pastor's out here fucking everybody left, right, and center, even though they're not supposed to, even though they're married. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people know this. A lot of people know what these people are doing behind closed doors. They just don't talk about it publicly. But the moment it comes to light and it's out in the public, then they have to save face and get away from the person or whatever it is. But these things are very commonplace. It's not like abnormal behavior.
Yeah,
I'm not using my words correctly. I'm not saying that it's not abnormal. What I'm trying to say is it happens fairly commonly, and it's just I'm having a hard time finding the words. But
no, I understand what you're saying. It reminds me of, I don't know how true this is. I've heard this from two different people, so who the fuck knows. But like I've heard that like if you go to like Gulf states, you go to like Saudi Arabia, UAE, that like a lot of the people there have very strict rules around things like gambling, things like drinking, fornicating, stuff like that. But a lot of these guys travel and do like crazy parties where they're obviously, it's like the most haram shit in the world, and they're breaking all sorts of shit. And it's just like everybody kind of knows that if you're from Saudi Arabia, I don't know how true that is, but I've heard that a lot from people in like the Gulf state areas. But yeah.
Absolutely. I have friends who were posted to Kuwait, and they were saying the exact same thing. Like the filthiness that happens commonly, society, everyone knows about it. It's only a shameful thing once it's public because everyone's embarrassed now. So like the wife might know, the husband can know, and nobody has. Well, I'm not saying they don't have an issue with it, but they all accept it. But it becomes public. All of a sudden, they go on this big apology tour, and they're saying how bad it is and how they're going to change or whatever. But these motherfuckers knew the whole time it was bad. They knew the whole time. They just didn't care because it was happening like in the hush hush.
Sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that's like the mistake of these guys is that when they're doing this, like, look at these countries, they do it. It's like, yes, they do it to some degree, but they don't do it with the same brazen attitude and level of disrespect that you have for them.
Not only that, I'm willing to bet that this is probably going to be more common with like women that are already kind of like baby stuck. Like, I doubt even in those countries is there going to be like a woman dating a guy and she's as like, even as a dark secret thing, he's like fucking around a ton and she's okay with that. I bet this is probably more common where it's like the woman's married, she's got like the kids and everything to take care of, and like, yeah, the guy might step in and fuck around and it's like, fuck him if he does it, but like it is what it is. But it's probably more common when they're kind of stuck in that situation. That'd be my guess.
I think the kids are definitely affected. I think just marriage in general, people get stuck.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's true too. Yeah, because I don't even want to divorce about it.
Yeah. Like once that happens and the joining happens, like, that's why physical abuse will often be commonplace in these kinds of relationships and never go reported or anything like that. It's just you're kind of in it. It's very hard to get away from it, and there's a lot that you're supposed to bear as a woman in terms of stuff you don't necessarily find acceptable, but you have to because like you just can't get divorced. It's like it's one of the biggest sins from a religious standpoint. It's embarrassing for the family. It's embarrassing for the individual and the shame that they feel. Like that. The decision to get married is you know, it's funny because over here they constantly talk about how like there's no advantages for men, but then you go to these other countries and like there's so many fucking disadvantages for women when it comes to marriage. Yeah, it's actually I feel like I feel like the disadvantages that women experience in those countries is far larger than the advantages or the disadvantages that men experience over here when it comes to the potential of divorce.
Sure.
Because think about it, you're locked into something where the dude can switch up his behavior at any point, and you're expected to stay.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty dumb. All right, bye. Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.